This is my hobby, the greatest hobby. Hello everyone, Hobbyist here. We are back at it again with our Talisman character exploration guide. And previously we had concluded the Woodland expansion characters, and how their abilities tend to focus more so on their ability to control their fate and their destiny, and how each has their own little niche that makes them special, if you haven't checked that out. But now, we have moved away from the Woodland expansion, and now we are going to go over the 6 Dragon expansion characters. Now, just to give you guys a bit of a heads up as far as what we're looking into with the rest of these characters, we're going to be more so focusing on their specialties when it comes to facing dragons, but more importantly, which Dragon King is going to benefit that character the most, because each one's going to have their different strength against each of them. And it's very important to know who the current Dragon King is, if you remember from our Dragon expansion tutorial video, on why it's so important to be able to know which Dragon King it is that's going to benefit you the most. So let's go ahead and get on to this first character. The first character that we're going to be covering inside of the Dragon expansion is a domineering and power-hungry matriarch of the Dragon cults, who can perform ancient rituals and sacrifices to gain boons from the dragons she worships. Indeed, this is in reference to the Dragon Priestess. So, having played as the Dragon Priestess, and having been one of the first characters that I ever played as inside of the Dragon expansion, I honestly gotta say that the Dragon Priestess is a very solid character choice. In fact, I want to say she's probably one of the best characters, if not the best, inside of this expansion, just because she offers so much. And let me go ahead and show you guys what I mean by that. So taking a look at her stat card, as we normally do, you can see that she's got a strength of 2 and a craft of 4, which is pretty average for most characters. And then you can see down here, with us covering a new expansion, you can see that black dragon head logo, which is the symbol of the Dragon expansion. So if you are not particularly interested in playing with this expansion, or you're trying to separate it in a different compartment that is away from the rest of your Talisman adventures, just keep an eye out for that dragon head logo, and it'll just make things simpler for you. But moving forward with the rest of the Dragon Priestess, and why I think she's honestly a really good character, is that she's got a fate of 5, which is really good, considering that there's maybe only 2 other characters who share that same fate value. And then of course, she's got a life of 4, and then she is the evil character, our first evil character in the Dragon expansion, and one of the few characters who starts on the temple space. From a strategic standpoint, we can see that this is a pretty good spot. We've got a noticeable number of characters who start in the middle region in comparison to the outer region strip and the various locations. So being able to take advantage of that is definitely something that is really good for the Dragon Priestess, just speaking off of a position standpoint alone. But these next 5 abilities that the Dragon Priestess has, honestly, what more could you possibly ask for inside of her kit? So first things first, you begin the game with 2 spells. Okay, so that's not anything particularly out of the ordinary. We know that the wizard starts with 2 spells, and we're going to learn of future characters who also share the same trait. But depending on what those 2 spells are, and whatever ways that you're going to be able to acquire spells through the various expansions that also have spells, because the Dragon expansion is one of the few expansions that doesn't have a spell deck that gets merged in. So that is definitely something to keep an eye out for, so that way you know what sort of combinations of spells that you're going to be getting just right off the get-go. Because it's going to be important in how you use them, whether it be using them for your own benefits, or whether you're using them to change up the terrain, or to sabotage other players. Something that's really important. But the second character ability is where things get a little bit interesting. That is, whenever you encounter a cultist, you may take it as a follower instead of attacking it. So why would you want to be taking these cultists instead of attacking them? This is definitely something great, because inside of each Draconic Lord's deck, there is either going to be dragons, but the other 50% of enemies that are inside of these decks are cultists. And more times than not, against any other player, cultists really benefit when their respective lords are the Dragon King at the time, because each of them are going to add 3 to their attack score with their Draconic Lord being king. And sometimes they'll fight you with strength, sometimes they'll fight you with craft. Some of them are more condition based in how they're going to attack you, but they're pretty unpredictable to the same regards as the actual dragons themselves. So being able to take these as followers is pretty great, because it essentially gets to ignore any open-ended conflict, and it makes sense for their character. The Dragon Priestess is a priestess. She worships the dragons. She understands how the cultists feel about their respective dragon lords, so she's able to bring to them a call of action, if that makes any sort of sense. But what other purpose, when it comes to interacting with the rest of the game, do the cultists serve, and why do you want to necessarily collect them as followers? Well, these next 2 abilities more so lean into that aspect of how well they can play into your favor. His 3rd ability says, after rolling the die when praying, you may use all, none, or some of your followers before a ritual. Each follower used in the ritual adds 1 to your score. Now, it does say using any amount of followers that you have, any cultists, but do remember this, it does not say that you have to discard them after the ritual is completed. So, if you are able to acquire at least a minimum of 10 cultists, which isn't too hard, considering if you just keep going after scales and you find the right Draconic Lord cards, then it's easy pickings. The various locations that you can pray at, such as the chapel, if you manage to turn yourself good, is definitely something that's good. Or because you're already evil, if you come to the graveyard, then you have full autonomy over what it is that you want to be able to gain for yourself, whether it be replenishing your fate or gaining more fate. With 5 fate is still pretty good, or being able to get yourself more spells to cycle through. But more importantly than that is the fact of the matter that you have full control over the temple, which the temple is probably the best for just this base game and just the dragon expansion. That's not even excluding the high temple inside the city expansion. So being able to take advantage of all of that is honestly really great, and it's probably one of the best benefits of praying in comparison to most of the other characters that we've covered in the past. But then this 4th character ability, the one that I had mentioned earlier, is where she really starts to gain full control of the dragon expansion. And that is, whenever you encounter a dragon, you may offer a sacrifice instead of attacking it. To do so, discard 1 of your followers, objects, or spells, and roll 2 dice to pray with the same result as at the temple. If you are enslaved, you must miss your next turn instead. So the fact of the matter that you as the Dragon Priestess can simply just ignore any of the dragons that you come across so far as you have objects, spells, or followers, we can really start to see that there's a huge amount of benefit, because instead of fighting these dragons, let's say that Barthrax was your current king, and multiple strength dragons were coming out and trying to attack you. If you've been accumulating those objects, or because you start with 2 spells at the beginning of the game, and those spells aren't particularly useful to you at that moment, you can simply use those as cannon fodder and get rid of them. And depending on what you roll on the temple chart, you could easily start snowballing your stats without having to kill anything at all. So her playstyle really encourages you to dive into the Draconic Lord decks. If scales are starting to appear every which way, you want to start going after them, because you can either manipulate the temple into your favor If any of those cultists that you keep finding show up, you can just take them as followers to be able to greater increase your chances inside of the temple, and to be able to gain those huge stat boosts, to be able to gain those huge amount of life boosts. I'm telling you, the Dragon Priestess is probably one of the best characters. In fact, the first game that I ever played with her, inside of the Dragon expansion, we were playing with the Tower Inner region, and I was able to win because I just accumulated so many cultists and was able to work around so many dragons and build up stats to where then I could fight these dragons myself, where I could be able to take those dragons and turn them in for trophies and be able to build up even more, and then just keep constantly praying at the temple and using as many cultists that I could find to greater increase my chances and be able to find those particular rolling numbers that I want to have in order to boost myself down the road. It honestly is just super fantastic to have. And the Dragon Priestess is probably the one character inside this whole expansion that has the most control out of the 3 Draconic Lords, just because she plays so well into their favor. In this last character ability, I mean, honestly, what more else can be said? You are not affected by Dragon Rage. Honestly, aside from circumstances and NPCs in other expansions, I want to say that the Dragon Rage ability that each of the Draconic Lords has is probably my second highest cause of death in my playing experiences with Talisman. So as we know, the Dragon Rage tokens are indicated by this token here, in that each of the Draconic Lords is going to have a different ability in regards to what their Dragon Rage is. Barthrax was the consequence of either losing a follower or losing a life. With Cataris, it was losing an object or losing a life. And with Grillipis, it was either losing a spell or losing a life. Well, as a Dragon Priestess, because you're playing so well into their favor, you don't even have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about collecting skills to use to protect yourself or to get rid of the objects that you have. I mean, if you have a bunch of cursed objects, you can choose to get rid of those, but more times than not, you're really not affected by it. So you don't have to worry about having to deal with consequences that you can't really control. It's honestly really great for the Dragon Priestess. So as we can obviously see with this kit here, everything looks really good. Being able to acquire cultists, being able to control the dragons, but how does that play into the strategy when it comes to the 2 inner regions? Because remember, we're inside the Dragon expansion. The 2 inner regions of the Dragon Tower and the Dragon Realm play in 2 different ways, because one of them requires a talisman while the other doesn't. So let me show you what it is that it would look like if you were the Dragon Priestess, and how you would want to operate inside the confines of both the Tower and Dragon Realm. So this is the Dragon Realm. This is the realm that is more so the same inner region if you're more familiar with the more classic look and you're not trying to change up what it is that you're trying to do when it comes to still requiring a talisman in order to make it to the top. So just operating inside this path, most of everything still remains the same. The Dragonstone Mines over this way still focuses on either the strength or the craft route. And that's one thing that's noticeable that you can notice the difference with. That Dragonstone Mines talks about your strength, whereas the crypt this way focuses more so on your craft. And then of course there's dealing with death, which is covered with this dragon. It's replaced by it. The Hydra Dragon is the new werewolf that was replaced. And then of course the hatchery on this side is the replacement for the Hit Fiends. And each of these different areas is going to offer something else. So with the Dragon Priestess, because she more so highly ranks in craft, more so than strength, you're going to want to take this route across the crypt and then make your way all the way around. But just remember that the Hydra Dragon that you're facing is going to be strength based. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Same if the other way around. If you decide to invest in strength and very little in craft, then you might be able to make your strength route across the Dragonstone Mine. But then it may prove difficult at the Vampiric Dragon, or if you make it all the way to the hatchery, it might prove to have some level of difficulties as well. And the thing with the Dragon Realm that makes it very different from the Dragon Tower is that the scales play more of a role in how easy or how difficult it is to travel all the way through. And that's excluding the need for a talisman, so that is definitely something to keep in mind. But now, let me show you the difference when it comes to playing with the Dragon Tower. Here's the Dragon Tower, and as we talked about in the Dragon expansion tutorial, and how the Dragon King is going to play more so of a role inside of the Dragon Tower than they will inside of the Dragon Realm. We can see the various drawing locations and how you still have to move one at a time, and that drawing the cards from the specific areas is always going to be from the Dragon King that matches at the time. But how it's still going to be constantly shifting between the 3 Draconic Lords until you make it to the very top. So, with the Dragon Priestess, you have a bit of a less control when it comes to who the Dragon King is going to be, because it's going to be constantly shifting. So, as you're encountering these spaces, and as cultists or dragons start to appear, it is entirely up to you if you feel that you are confident enough, and hopefully at this point, if you make it inside of the inner region, you've already built up the stats to get this far. Because, even though cultists might appear, they still are enemies. And remember what we said about enemies. For every enemy that you defeat in the various spaces is the number of spaces that you can advance. So inside the Plane of Peril, we know that we only draw one card when we get there from whoever the Dragon King is. And if we beat that one enemy, we get to advance one to our next turn. And for the 2 cards, we beat 2 enemies, we advance 2, and then of course, if we get far enough, there's 3 enemies, we beat them, we advance 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. I could even get this far, draw 4 enemies, beat them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you make your way to the very top. Now, like we said previously, a talisman isn't required to make it to the top of the tower, but it's more so focused on your stats. Should you be more concerned about taking in more cultists? Should you be more concerned with sacrificing either followers, spells, objects, instead of facing these dragons yourself? Honestly, it's more difficult to say. It's more so on your part to determine whether it'd be more effective to kill off these creatures and to kill off these cultists, or to use them to your benefits before you make it all the way to the top, to face whoever the Dragon King is. Because remember, once you make it to the top of the Dragon Tower, whoever the Dragon King is by the time you make it there is who you're stuck with, until either you die or the Dragon King dies. So that is definitely something else to keep in consideration. Overall, what do I think of the Dragon Priestess? I think she's a fantastic character, probably one of the best characters, if not the best, inside of the Dragon expansion. Simply because she controls the Draconic Lords, if we're being entirely honest. As long as you've got objects, followers, or spells, you don't have to worry about a dragon ever again. Any cultists that show up, you can just take them and use them to your own benefit to build your own stats. And you don't really have to worry about anything. So, she has probably one of the best kits inside of this expansion. And I would say she is probably the first character that you want to go with if you're deciding to play the Dragon expansion the first time. Because she's just got so much range and depth to her that it's honestly just fantastic. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.